So much of this could be a conversation about why you should vote, but in another lens, we're just talking about what it means to follow Jesus. We got a few days until Halloween, and then a couple days after that, the election. Adrian, which one are you more excited for?
I thought you were going to ask me which one was I more afraid of. Um, Halloween is not my favorite
Mm,
holiday, but it does feel this year like a lot of goblins and ghouls are inhabiting the election space. Um, I just don't even know what to say. I think what we're trying to focus on here is our faith. We've set this theme, faith over fear, because we certainly are being whipped up and I think pulled in so many different directions and invited to worry and be afraid of our neighbors. Um, and so this invitation, I think, to center and ground ourselves in the God that we profess, to believe that miracles are possible, however you want to take that, and to trust that God is still in control is really where we're wanting to direct people at the same time that we're saying, please go and vote. Please, please go and vote. Um, but also to remember, and this is in our holy text, this book that we love so much, is constantly reminding us, that this is God's world. It's not Caesar's, it's not the king's world. So we do want to vote with all the energy and commitment that we have, but to remember this is an election and this is a moment in time. And, God is the God uh, of what was, what is, and what is to come.
mm.
So.
Whew, yep, yep. Okay, so that there you go. Sermon number one has been preached. Amen to that. Uh, we are looking at October 27th is what's coming up for us here, and so there's a lot going on at Riverside. We
Oh
don't
my
know what
gosh,
text we're going to talk about because we have a guest preacher for that day, and they
we
have
do.
not told us the text they're doing. They're probably going off narrative lectionary, which is fine. We're cool with
Yep.
that. So we're going to tell you who that guest is and why that alone is a reason we think you'll want to come and join us in the room or online at Riverside. But then particularly this coming Sunday is 9 days before the presidential election and all the elections, by the way. Let's just not
That's
look at the
right.
top of the ticket.
That's
The,
right.
the whole thing matters. Vote the whole page, people. Do some research on everybody you're voting for. Um,
And the
so,
propositions
oh yes, turn it
on the
over.
back.
Turn
Turn
it
it
over.
over. That's right. That's right. Because abortion
Okay.
is on the ballot in a
Oh,
lot of states, including New York. So.
okay. Okay. So let's start with this coming Sunday. Who is in the pulpit 9 days before the election?
So we're really excited to welcome the Reverend Dr. William Barber II, who is now serving, is it out at Yale, I believe?
Yeah.
At I don't know the name of the institute, but he's there teaching about justice and love and peace. And we're really excited that he's going to come across the river and be in the pulpit this Sunday.
And he's coming. This is a part of he's been at other churches.
Hmm.
He's intentionally crafting something to say from pulpits, a sermon that he wants to share with this election coming up. Can you shed a bit
Yeah.
of that whole thing he's working on? That doesn't give away his cards, I don't
Right.
think, but it helps us kind of
No.
orient ourselves to what to expect.
Absolutely. So I don't know that he's calling it an election tour, but it has that sort of sensibility. He's not serving at the church that he used to serve in North Carolina. He really is here doing this work at the institute that he's the founder of and the founding leader of, I should say. But he reached out to a number of churches around the country and asked if he could come and be in their pulpit to bring this message in advance of the election. I don't know what direction he will go in, but if you've heard Dr. Barber speak, you know that it will be a stunning um, sermon for the ages. He's quite his metaphors are amazing. His conviction and his centeredness, I think his faith over fear is almost without measure. I think that we will be buoyed up by what he has to say. At the same time, I think he will help ground us in the reality of what we're up against. So we're expecting to learn a lot. I think to be encouraged and also to be challenged and pushed to do something to help the folks who are dear to his heart. So I imagine that he's going to talk with us about poverty, that he's going to talk about income disparity, disparities in health and education, the things that he's been championing and working on behalf of for decades.
It's been a minute since he's been in the pulpit at Riverside. It
Yeah.
was, I think, back in 2019, I believe, on
Hmm.
I think the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King offering the Beyond Vietnam
Hmm.
speech. Somewhere around, my year might be a little bit off, but that was, I believe, the last Sunday he preached. So I think that sermon is still echoing in the nave. So I'm
Right.
sure this one will continue to do the same. And he's sticking around a bit after worship. We'll have a talk back with him right there in the nave online as well after worship. So for those of you who are like wanting to ask a question or hear a bit more, that's going to happen. We often do that with our guest preachers. And if that wasn't enough, okay, so Reverend Barber is preaching. We've also got one of the co-authors of Baptizing America, Dr. Brian Kaylor, is going to be in the building,
That's
wrapping
right.
up a big series we've been doing as a church with this book, Baptizing America: How Mainline Protestants Helped Build Christian Nationalism, forward by the Reverend Adriene Thorne. So Brian Kaylor is coming. He'll join us at Open Bible Study in the morning. That'll be a hybrid in-the-room online experience, and then he will have a lunch and learn at I think 1:30ish or so after worship in South Hall or someplace wherever the building says, and online as well. So we got a lot happening, talking about the election coming up, guest preachers. Christian nationalism is, not just a thing we can point to those evangelicals, but apparently mainline Protestants had a hand in building that table too. Whew.
Absolutely.
So okay, here's my that was my preamble for a question for you.
Okay.
What is the role of churches, of preachers, in this political turmoil, waters, palette? What is our kind of responsibility or call in the midst of all of this? What do we do?
Right. So I think we get a model from Jesus in the gospel. He reminds us of who we are and who Caesar is, and says, I think wisely, that we give to Caesar and to, these governments that have a certain amount of control over us, what is theirs. But ultimately, he reminds us of who our allegiance is pointed in the direction of. And our allegiance is to God. I don't think, as much as churches, we wring our hands about our 501(c)(3) status, I don't think it is the role of churches to be neutral in times of election, particularly in times of election like this one, when there are so many um, not subtle comments about people. These people are God's people. And I think for churches to remind their congregations and their neighbors and all those who will listen that all of the folks are God's folk, I think is part of our role uh, to um, to give a little shake or wake up call to those who need to be reminded that things that are being said, particularly in this election, do not align with our understanding of who we are as followers of Jesus. Because I think it has become acceptable and okay as a Christian, as a person of faith, whether that faith is Christianity or some other, to be okay with some of the things that have been said, some of the harmful and dangerous and violent things that have been done. And that's never been a tenet or a centering belief of any of the great or lesser known or lesser followed religions. We are, you know, people of faith who ground what we do in love, who ground what we do in service and support. We think of the Good Samaritan story. We think of the prodigal son. We center forgiveness. We center helping the neighbor. And it's very disturbing that we are becoming folks who are okay with violence, and that religious leaders are folks who are not only hosting people who say violent and derogatory things, but are preaching these things from their pulpit as if these are the teachings of Jesus, and they
Yeah.
are absolutely not. So I think it is important that we take a stand. Not that we tell people who to vote for, but we certainly can talk about values. We certainly can talk about our faith. We certainly can say this action, this behavior, these words are not okay, and they are not of God.
Yeah. Yeah. That it's too easy, it seems, for some flavors of Christianity to just swing so far to one side and become synonymous with the political party. and probably easy for other sides of flavors of Christianity to swing the other way and just become synonymous the other side as well. I like to think that the church is called to be bipartisan in that we offer the same critique to both sides, the same bias to both sides. Does this exemplify God's love and justice? You know, success isn't one candidate. Oh, you got some pushback? Okay, okay.
Well, I just wonder if we're called to be bipartisan.
I
You
say
know,
that word loosely to mean we're not
okay,
like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
that we're
I guess
not
here's
to
what I mean by
take
that.
that we're not taking sides.
We are bipartisan in that we bring the same approach to both parties. If they are not functioning out of love and justice, they are out of line. Whether you are Democrat or Republican, I am not going to just say we did it if a certain candidate gets elected. We got
Right.
work to do no matter who gets in that office. My
Always.
bias doesn't. Yeah, I'll see the party, but my bias, my prompt as a person of faith is called forward regardless of who is elected to any office. And you know, I don't think any candidate is running perfectly on a love and justice campaign. They've all got
They
some
are
things that I want to
not.
poke at.
They are not. Because, we are flawed humans. But, to go back to what I think the church's role is, in politics and just in life in general, is this invitation to wrestle and this invitation to struggle. I think to align what we profess and what we believe with the way we act in the world. And
Yeah.
politics is one of the ways that we act in the world. And to your point, we don't have a perfect candidate. We don't have anyone who's running on love and justice. I mean, there is a candidate who talks about that, who, is not one of the major
Yes. Yeah.
candidates. What we're hearing from them are, well, you know what we're hearing from them. I don't have. I'm not even gonna give
Ooh,
some
yeah.
advertisement to them. Um, but I think it is important to be silent and to be still and to ask yourself or to ask God, um, some questions because while these elections don't make all the decisions in our life, they are an important part of our life and of our neighbor's life. And so, one of the things I think that is helpful in this moment, there is a meme that talks about how to vote, and it says, vote as if Black Lives Matter, vote as if, you know, your child is pregnant by a rapist, or vote as if we're not voting neutrally. And if you need a guideline, think about folks who are marginalized, think about folks who are poor, think about
Yeah.
folks who are attacked by the police, and vote in their interests, right? Um, because they need the neighbor to help them out in this moment. I keep thinking and lamenting about what is going on in the Middle East, and just watch this little Palestinian boy weeping last night on Linda Sarsour's Instagram page because his whole family is dead,
Yeah, I
right?
saw that
He's the
too.
only
Yeah.
one left, and he
My
looked
family
like
was
he was
martyred.
about what,
Yeah.
6 years old, 7 years
Yeah.
old, and he's trying not to cry. This baby is trying not to cry. Um, and I want to vote for him. He doesn't live in this country, but I want to vote for policies that are going to put an end to that. I think about the affordable housing crisis in the city. I think about elected officials who are doing some really dirty things and lining their own pockets, while families that I know
Mm.
are struggling to pay rent. A mom and her two daughters that I know in Brooklyn don't know where they're going to go because the rent has been raised so high they can't stay in the neighborhood where she raised her children.
Mm.
I'm watching hundreds of people come into the food pantry here at Riverside Church every single week, and it's getting colder here, and people need good, nutritious food. Um,
Yeah.
and the funding for public schools is being cut. Um, Children are being shot in schools. I mean, when I think about that, and I'm grateful to God that my child has not experienced that, but I have to vote for families who've lost a baby to senseless gun violence in their school. And this suggestion that this is just our reality, I'm sorry. That doesn't track with the God that I know, but it also doesn't track with my understanding as a parent. I want parents to feel that they can send their children to school and that they're going to come home. Whether I'm a person of faith or not, I think people's babies should come home from school alive, right? Not in a body bag.
Yeah, bring back the tornado drills. Get rid of the shooter drills. I
Exactly.
don't want those. Should not be a thing
Exactly.
that. Sadly, it is a thing kids need to learn in our world, but it doesn't need to be. There could be
Right.
actions, and we might not be able to get rid of all the tornadoes. Although we could talk about climate change as
Oh
well.
my God,
But
that's
it's a
another
lot
one.
we could. Yeah, but there's. Yeah, there. All of that. Let's just stop for
All
a
of
second and
that.
say amen to that little sermon we just heard.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
mean,
not
the
the
book of
sermon
James.
I want to be preaching either.
But it's why we vote. I mean, it's now we're just talking about voting, but I think this is what we're
Right.
talking about. It's
Right.
easy for people to go cast their vote for themselves, thinking what impacts me. And there's
Right.
not saying you shouldn't think about the impact it has on you, but don't let the world end with you.
Yep.
What does Martin Luther say something about navel gazing and
Yep.
our selfishness?
Right.
We can't just be staring at ourselves when we're going to the ballot box. We need to really be looking at those who are the most marginalized and
Right.
oppressed, and those are the ones who we're casting a vote for, not just,
Yeah.
oh, is this going to make my housing tax going to go up by a little? Maybe. Okay, that's a thing. However, that's different than someone who doesn't have a house at all because of the
House at
policies that
all. Right.
exist.
Right. And
Yeah,
some of us do need to vote in our own interest because some of us are voting against our interests, thinking that we too are billionaires or that we too are going to have to worry about capital gains taxes. So some of us actually do need to vote in our interest. And yes, voting in your interest might mean that someone who doesn't look like you also benefits. But you know what? Um, you're not a billionaire.
yeah,
Um, and the majority of us are struggling. The majority of your fellow citizens are not the 1%.
yeah,
And most of us that are listening to this message probably are not in that group either. And so bringing the power of the people together to benefit the masses, I think, is, sounds a little bit like something Jesus wants us to do, to take care of the folks who are being left out of these systems.
yeah.
Um, and to hear, frightening things that there might not be a voting system to vote in after this election says so much. I
Yeah,
won't interpret that for you, but sit with it and think about it and
yeah,
vote
yeah.
accordingly.
So much of this could be a conversation about why you should vote, but in another lens, we're just talking about what it means to follow Jesus, to care for
I
those
think,
who are
yeah,
overlooked, pushed out, left out, don't have what is needed because of
yeah,
societal structures and
yeah,
injustices. That's the call as a person of faith, particularly a person who follows this radical rabbi named Jesus every year, every day, not just every 4 years. Now, it's especially important to keep that lens in front of us as we are in this election year. And like we said, you're not just voting for the name at the top, but keep going all the way down and turn the thing over. Maybe even do some research. Here, let me see if I can do some magic. Go to this website and you can learn more about your ballot right there, that website. I'm hoping I found it.
yeah, that's good. And do good research. I want to say Dr. Tressie McPherson was on Instagram saying Google is not a research tool, all right? Because those algorithms will pull you into things that you think are research, but they're not. They're people who actually get doctorates, get degrees in how to do research. So you want to make sure that you're getting your research from reputable sources. And there are ways to do that, and you can use Google to do that. But in my family, we say cousin Bobo, but it's a way of saying someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. You don't want to get your information from cousin Bobo, right? There are folks out there who study things and are scholars of research and scholars of political science. And I know there's a move towards anti-intellectualism, but there are people out there who actually know things. And you could read a book. Reading a Facebook post is not the same as reading a book, friends. There are people who've dedicated their lives to some of these topics. Read some of those books, watch their videos, and do some real research. Um,
So maybe a good homework for everyone watching is carve out an hour between now
there
and
you go.
election day. Like
Yeah,
dedicate some time to act at least, I mean, maybe more than that would be good, but give a solid 60 minutes to just look this over and be as informed as possible, to dig a little deeper, go past just the surface, look at some of the biases and try to find the most well-rounded information you can. It takes some time, it takes some energy, but it's necessary and worth it every year, every 4 years, this 4 year election cycle in particular. So
right.
you got some work to do.
Yes,
Okay, now you're not in the pulpit this Sunday, so
I
Reverend
am
Barber
not.
is. We just talked about that. Okay, but here's my question for you. And are you in the pulpit next week, November?
I am. I am.
Okay,
All Saints.
so we will get you. Okay, All Saints, and that's the Sunday before the election. So you
It
got a lot you're
is.
holding there. We'll talk about that next week. But for right
Amen.
now, with the election coming 9 days away as of this coming Sunday, if you could preach a 1 to 2 sentence sermon that everyone would hear before they vote, what would it be?
A
I'm giving you
one
two.
to two sentence?
Yeah, yeah, 1 to 2 sentences. You got a mini sermon that everyone who votes gets to hear. What would it be?
Maybe because you just mentioned Martin Luther. What popped into my mind? I think maybe the first sentence would be something like, "Remember your baptism and vote your faith over your fear."
Ooh.
Might be my first sentence. And then my second sentence might be something like, Jesus is counting on us to Jesus is counting on us to maintain a world that he could live in. Not that he could live in, that he might be proud of. Because I think Jesus can live anywhere and lives in difficult and harsh places. But Jesus is counting on his followers to maintain a world that, I don't know, how would you finish that?
That
That
that yeah.
he would, I don't want to say be proud of, that reflects what he taught us. How
Mm,
about that?
I like that. I like
Remember
that.
your baptism and vote your faith over your fear. Jesus is counting on us to maintain a world that reflects what he taught us.
Amen. There
I
we
think
go.
that's it.
That's good.
Amen.
I I
Thanks.
I love us all getting to kind of see you process that in real time. She didn't know I was going to ask her that, everybody. That was like
No.
literally on the spot. Hey, surprise. Sometimes we play the emojis. Sometimes I ask her to write a 2 sentence sermon out of nowhere. And she can
Right.
do it all.
Right.
Adrian, thank you for that.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
welcome. I would also say, regardless of how everything goes, Jesus is still counting on us to maintain a
Yeah.
world that reflects what he taught us. So,
Mm,
the day after the election, we're back at it because
yeah.
that's what we're here for.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got, as of this Sunday, 9 days to that election. So
Yep.
first thing should be, well, first is you have homework. Do an hour of research between now and the election, maybe more. But join us for worship. This coming Sunday is definitely going to be worth coming for. A whole lot happening October 27th. Open Bible study at 9:30 in the morning. Got a special guest, Dr. Brian Kaylor. Uh, Bishop Barber in the pulpit. Join us for that fantastic worship service. You will not want to miss it. Sermon talk back with him after. Lunch and learn with Dr. Kaylor in the afternoon. We're talking politics, Christian nationalism. We got the world going on at Riverside today on Sunday. It's going to be good. So trcnyc.org gives you all the info to show up in the room or online, and we look forward to seeing you this coming Sunday. And then we'll see you back in this place next week for another episode of The Word Made Fresh.
Make sure you're registered to vote.
I think it's too late if they're not, though.
I think New York is October 26th.
Oh, if you're in New York, quick, do it. Do it now. Do it now.